I have never seen a single episode of the popular animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender. I only know two things about the show. First, everything was cool. Second, then the Fire Nation attacked. I also didn't know anything about Avatar: The Last Airbender, the video game, for the Nintendo Wii. Before playing, I had very low expectations, because it's a licensed game based on a Nickelodeon show for children, and licensed video games for children tend to be pretty weenie, usually falling on a scale somewhere between mediocre and terrible. However, Avatar: The Last Airbender, the video game for the Nintendo Wii, defied all my expectations by being astoundingly kind of okay. So let's get into it.
Boomy!
Boo, you! How's my oldest friend in the whole world? So, what's this about machines?
They're destroying everything, Boomy. A wise man told us we could learn about them here.
Here? There's nothing here but a bowl of fruit and a large man.
Avatar: The Last Airbender, the video game, also known as Avatar: The Legend of Aang, in Europe, was released for other systems on October 10th, 2006, and for the Nintendo Wii on November 19th, 2006. One of 22 launch titles for the Nintendo Wii. The game was published by THQ, who had a long partnership with Nickelodeon, publishing and developing dozens of Nickelodeon licensed video games since the 90s, of which Avatar was one of their most commercially successful, selling over 1 million copies. The video game tells an original side story set in between seasons 1 and 2 of the show. Unfortunately, there's barely any plot to the game at all, which is a shame, because from what I've heard, the show's story is very good. And by essentially ignoring the show's plot, the game ignores what should have been the game's strongest element. Without having much plot to prop things up, the game has to rely exclusively on its gameplay, which is pretty shallow. But more on that in a bit. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, the video game, players are tasked with stopping this evil woman, who is creating an army of murder robots. She plans on using her army of murder robots to create world peace by conquering the world with murder robots. So it's kind of like that time Darth Vader created peace on the planet Alderaan by blowing up the entire planet. The game explains absolutely nothing about the show's plot or characters, so if you're a newcomer like me, expect to be pretty confused. Even after beating the game, I had no idea who any of these characters were, or what their relationships to each other are, and they barely interact over the course of the game. The main character is little baldy boy Aang here, who is presumably the titular Last Airbender, but he never seems to use any air magic. As far as I can tell, he just hits people with a stick. There's also this girl who uses water magic and is serious and has healing magic. There's this boy who uses a boomerang and has a bit of a Jar Jar Binks style goofball comedy relief. And there's this other boy who uses rock magic and is just kind of around and doesn't have any discernible personality whatsoever. So I guess it's kind of like he himself is a rock. As far as characterization goes, the game is essentially a beat 'em up. You walk around and you beat things up. The combat system is very, very simple. You mash one button and your character beats up whatever's in front of them. There's also a block button, but nearly every single enemy uses attacks that are unblockable, and your character is too slow and stiff to dodge them. So I guess you're just supposed to take those attacks right in the face. There are also special area of effect and status effect attacks, which make use of motion controls, simple swings of the controller. These motion controls usually work, except when they don't. I barely used the special attacks because spamming the normal attack got me through every single encounter. There are special blocking moves that I assume are supposed to be used on those unblockable attacks mentioned earlier, but their animations are so slow and long that by the time they're done, the enemy has already moved on to another attack, making them useless. The combat is actually pretty difficult. It's easy to get overwhelmed and stun-locked to death by enemies, and early on you have to play pretty carefully. This second boss battle against some random jailer is so freaking hard that the only way I found to win was by running away, spamming the heal on my allies, and letting them do all the work very slowly, whittling the boss's health down. But then the combat becomes brain dead easy when you unlock the healer character, at which point you become an unstoppable juggernaut, since she instantly heals you whenever you take any little bit of damage. The combat system is pretty mindless from then on. The combat is overall pretty stiff. It really needs a bit more fluidity, and a dodge button would have been a major improvement. There are 4 characters to play as, but they all play basically the same way. Mash the A button until every enemy is dead. The game's strongest aspect is its variety. Over the course of the game, you journey to a somewhat stunning number of different locales. From the icy howling wastes of the north to lost islands full of ancient ruins, and then this sprawling rock magic city. And everywhere you go, you face off against entirely new enemies, like these bear platypuses, or in the city where you beat gangs of kitty cats to death in the street, like some kind of psychotic animal control officer with a thirst for feline blood. Outside of combat, there's actually a lot more to the game than you might expect. There are open levels with hub towns full of NPCs and shopkeepers and side quests. Unfortunately, the NPCs all say the exact same 2 lines. The shopkeepers have nothing worth buying, and the side quests are total drivel. There's also a stealth mode, but stealth sections are let down by poor level design, because there's never anything to hide behind when your invisibility meter runs out. There is also a level progression system, inventory management, and even a crafting system, but it all just feels extremely simple and bare bones and barely worth bothering with. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, the video game, the developers have created a very strong base from which to expand on. There's a solid combat system here, supported by a number of two simple secondary systems. There's a lot here, but it needs to be expanded and polished before it can be really called a good game. The developers will have their opportunity to do that expanding and polishing, since 2 sequels would be released for the Nintendo Wii in the coming years. I will review those 2 sequels someday, since I am going to review every game ever released for the Nintendo Wii, or die trying. Oh yeah. Woo! Wee!